begin.
That's okay. Hello. So thank you everyone for coming. Hopefully more of our fellow members will be joining us as they are coming in for lunch. But without further ado, we'll try to get started so that we can end around 1 p.m. as we projected. So without further ado, Harley, our CSU General Coordinator, will do a little bit of an introduction.
Yeah, hi everyone, thanks for coming. So obviously this is about the proposed tuition increases, but just a few words about the CSU. We're the student union representing all the undergraduates at Concordia. We have some members from ASFA, which is the Arts and Science Student Association at Concordia, pairing with us on this. So yeah, the tuition increases are obviously a really big thing that we all need to work together to deal with, or the proposed increases. I think how many of us, 3 out of 4 of us here are out of province students. I certainly wouldn't have done my education at Concordia if I had to pay the proposed increases. It just wouldn't have happened. So I think it's really important that, you know, we get student opinion and you tell us your thoughts on it, how it could impact you or how it would have impacted you in the case of if you would have come to Montreal or not, things like that. And we work with, you know, every other student association that we can to mobilize against this. We have one benefit on this, that is that we can, the university shares our concern, maybe not for the right reasons, I would say, but shares our concern in terms of the reduction in budget that this would cause. So we have the benefit that on this issue we can work with the university. But it's really important that as a student movement, it's about the amount of people that we can get mobilized to deal with this. So yeah, thanks everyone for coming. And I want to thank these 3 and everyone else who worked behind the scenes to make this happen. And like kind of other interview requests to deal with and all sorts of stuff like that. So thanks very much for making that happen.
All right. Hey, everyone. I'm Adam, student in School of Community and Public Affairs, and I'm just going to talk a bit about the history of the student movement a bit in Quebec. So since the 60s, students have been coming together with their unions. Unions form coalitions with each other and have threatened to go on strike. And a very common thread in all this has been for free tuition or to end tuition hikes, the biggest of which was back in 2012, where a big, massive coalition was formed, of which some student unions at Concordia joined and went on strike because the Quebec Liberal government under Jean Charest was going to increase tuition for everybody by 75%. And so in the end, that didn't happen. There were strikes for months. And I just want you to remember that just because right now it does not affect in-province students like myself, I'm from Montreal, that it will this is probably just a preamble to something that will affect everybody. And now I'm going to pass it over to Lily.
Hi everybody, so my name is Lily. I'm the mobilization coordinator at ASFA, which is the Arts and Science Student Union here at Concordia. And as Charlie mentioned, I'm an out-of-province student as well. So for a bit of context on why I came here, you know, I was very interested. I'm from BC, so there's not really the same kind of movement as there is in Quebec, especially in student spaces. And so I was really interested in the mobilizing power that has been here for so long and the massive effects that has had. And yeah, I don't think I would have been able to come here if I wasn't, you know, paying the same tuition that I would be paying in BC, but I came here for lots of other reasons, which we can get into a bit more. But since I started at Concordia in 2019, I have seen a lot of the different ways that the student unions can actually mobilize and that we can use our collective power as students. But But this is a very interesting and particular instance, as many people know. Oftentimes, especially in 2012, since the proposed tuition hikes were for all Quebec students, it was something that really allowed us all to unite on. Everybody obviously didn't want that, but what we've seen is, under the guise of kind of this being about language politics, is that this is a very targeted increase. And the idea is that by having it be directed only out of province students, that students aren't going to come together and coordinate and mobilize in the same ways as before, and that we're not going to be able to fully utilize our collective power to fight this, since it doesn't affect all students right now. But something that's really important that Adam mentioned is that these kind of increases always happen in rollouts. So it's often begins with one group and then it kind of expands to other groups. And so targeting out of province students and international students especially, we've seen even in recent years significant increases in international student tuition. It's very direct, it's very intentional, and it's meant to really kind of alienate certain groups of the student population so that we can't, or we don't, come together and really collectively mobilize against these things. So I also just wanted to talk a little bit about my experience getting involved in Concordia and some of the avenues that students can get involved in fighting against these kinds of austerity measures. And then I think we'll probably get into a bit more of a discussion, and I think we really want to hear from you guys about what our strategy is going to be moving forward. But basically, when I began in 2019, I was a part of the Geography Undergraduate Student Society, and something that we were very passionate about at the time, and still are, was the university's divestment. So the university, pushing the university to remove its investments from fossil fuels. So that was something that students said, hey, we know this is a problem, we really want to mobilize together and strike in order to draw attention to this. And so after we had called the strike and planned it, we were very lucky to have the university actually make an announcement that they were going to be removing their investments from fossil fuels. And it was projects like these, years of student activism on various initiatives that really pushed the university to make that kind of a decision. But in this context, the university, like Carly mentioned, is a lot more aligned with students. For different reasons, obviously, they also don't want to see these increases. So in the past, where we've had strikes on department levels about very specific issues, last year, actually, the Arts and Science Student Union had over 10,000 students on strike for a reading week. Those kinds of things are much more directed at the university administration. And so I think it's really going to be important for us to have a conversation about how we're going to coordinate, how we're going to work with other student unions and build solidarity in order to fight this with our collective power that we have, and in a way that's directly targeting the Quebec government.
Yeah, thanks everyone for talking about all your experiences. I think the role of the town hall is really to hear from you guys feedback. All feedback is valuable, whether you just want to talk about that you're from out of province or that you're from in province, and whether how you think that this will impact you, your friends, your family, how you'd like to see the CSU advocate for you going forward, and working with either other associations or other institutions to kind of put a stop to these tuition hikes. I guess just some information before we get into kind of comments, feedback, questions. In terms of information that's specific to Concordia and that you should all know. So the government has asked all the institutions, and to the best of my knowledge, it's been confirmed several times that this is both Anglophone and Francophone institutions. Even if the impact will be felt greater on the Anglophone institutions, the Francophone institutions are still affected by the tuition hikes, and the government is demanding that they instate a floor of tuition, meaning a minimum, a required minimum, which would be 17,000 for province students and 20,000 up for international students. Now, I have gotten some questions from students about kind of how the government's making this a bit complicated to understand with their whole like tax redistribution, like what are they talking about in terms of redistribution, the claims they're making about other provinces and how they subsidize it. I guess what's important to know is that the government is essentially asking Concordia and other institutions to go above the minimum, right? What they're saying is, we're instating this floor because we want to take this money and redistribute it to the Francophone university sector. But to compensate for losses for individual institutions, to compensate for the losses that Concordia will have, they're telling Concordia, hey, we encourage you guys to, charge $30,000 for international students, pocket that extra $10,000, charge, go above the minimum. And that way that will minimize the losses. Concordia has said thus far that they have no intention to go above the floor. In fact, that they didn't even want these increases to be suggested in the first place. Why they might not want that is that it is a pretty existential threat to some of our programs at Concordia. Some programs might actually cease to exist because if some programs are suffering upwards of 90% enrollment loss, you can't carry on a program with 10% remaining students. Some, of course, faculties or programs are more susceptible than others. I wouldn't want to say susceptible, actually, it just happens that they might attract a larger proportion of non-resident students. And I think we all need to, that can also affect many different, the same goes for many different small programs or small departments at other institutions as well. And I think for those of us who are from these larger faculties who maybe have a more 50-50 or a more balanced sort of demographics where our funding for some of our programs won't be threatened as much, I think it's still important that we still try to advocate and be in solidarity with the programs that will really be threatened by this. And again, it remains to be seen all of the impacts, but some schools seriously are looking at shutting down. Like some of their more smaller institutes, their smaller research programs, both at the undergrad and graduate level. We heard at McGill last night that a whole undergraduate program in the arts is looking to be removed, and I wouldn't be surprised if that was very similar for some of our extremely small fine arts programs as well. I think in terms of like facts, that's pretty much it. I mean, there's a few statistics that you guys might have heard thrown around. Concordia is projecting on the conservative side that we would still lose enrollment by upwards of 60%. And you may have heard the number in the media, whether or not that's important to you. But funding-wise, Concordia in and of itself would be looking at losing upwards of like tens of millions of dollars per year after a certain amount of years, and that would just kind of decrease over time as the long-term projections come to be. So, sorry to end on that not so great note, but we'd love to hear about how this is impacting you guys and how your union can better advocate for you, both internally with the administration as well as externally in the face of the government and with the other communities.
Sorry, it's just a small question about Concordia, right? They have a vested interest in what we're doing, and so I'm wondering how they can actually contribute or like help us, or like did they mention any plans on countering this? Are they lobbying anything? I'm just because they say it's against their interest, but like I'm kind of on the fence about what they're doing.
So great question. There's a few things that they're doing. It's definitely there can, I think, definitely be more that can be done, and I think it's important that we get student feedback that we can bring back to them. I think primarily the president, Graham Carr, has been really present in the press, both French and English, making all types of opinion pieces and that, up to you whether or not you think that's valuable. Besides that, they have released an open letter to the government with their fellow English colleges and universities in the province. So a lot of it has been, open letters, media. Internally, they're doing their projections as to like how it's going to affect each program, which I kind of touched on. I'd say that the CSU has, we've spoken to them, and we've also floated the idea of like what they could do to help support students mobilizing. So I think that remains to be seen. Like if that's either A, a good idea, B, what the administration could be a true ally in like advancing things on. But yeah, so far it's been a lot of those like closed door meetings with government officials that the university's been doing. Like they are denouncing it, don't get me wrong, but it's you know, a lot of that sort of more political. Yeah.
Can I also that? Yeah, I think that another important aspect of like having the university on our side is going to be the types of responses that we get to student mobilization and the way that we can kind of, I want to say, work with certain administration and especially faculty. So in the past, when there are like strikes or walkouts or whatever kinds of actions that students want to have, there's going to be a variety of responses from the faculty, from administration, etc. So for example, if we were planning like a walkout one day for arts and science students, I could technically email all of the department administrators and ask them to send out a letter to all of the faculties and say, hey, just so you know, this is something that students are planning, and keep them in the loop. And oftentimes that can make things a lot easier for students when faculty is on board and when the administration isn't breathing down their necks and saying, no, don't send out any information about this, like whatever. But if it's something that they're a bit more understanding with, there's a lot more opportunity for these kinds of actions to go a bit smoother, if that makes sense. So not having the administration breathing down our neck when we're trying to plan certain things, and just having more cooperation between students and faculty and administration, and just more understanding of where students are coming from in these struggles. So I think even in terms of more student-based mobilization that isn't really like, we can have these conversations with the university and we can work with them in lots of ways, but if there are times that we want to go outside of that and have more like radical actions, that there can still be ways that having them like quote unquote on our side can be beneficial to students mobilizing. Yeah.
One last thing is just that I think it's kind of like we both have our position to play in this. And from the university side, this is one aspect of, I would say, three main ones to do with funding issues that they've been kind of targeted with. And I know from the administration that like it takes up a huge amount of their time these days is dealing with government relations to try and figure out a way to not have any of these proposals that will negatively affect Concordia and other universities be implemented. So this is just like another one on the pile, essentially. So they work on that side and kind of play the game how they can, and they have the contacts that they need to deal with on that. I think our role really can be, a large amount of mobilization, and in this instance, that really helps them. Because if they're trying to go to people and say, we would like to be supported on this in like the business community or something to do with why students should stay in Quebec or something like this. If they're trying to do something like that and they can point to like, oh, we had 20,000 of our students sign something or walk out in support of this, then the people that they're trying to deal with can actually see like, okay, there's a backing to this.
Gives like legitimacy.
Exactly. So yeah, but yeah, from their end they have different tactics, but I know it's just one on the whole pile of like adjustments to funding the university. So
I just mention one thing quick. I graduated in music last year. I'm from Brazil. I paid roughly $20,000 per year. So I finished paying my debt last month.
Congratulations.
But one thing that people don't take in consideration most of the time is when I moved here, I was paying 2 Brazilian reals for 1 Canadian. Now I'm paying 4 to 1. So I would have paid $40,000 to my currency right now compared to 2018. So when they raise $10,000 now for a South American student from Argentina, Uruguay, Colombia, whatever, he's paying the currency that devaluated because of COVID. That makes it 3 or 4 times sometimes more expensive right now, and they're not going to come at all.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I think someone in the back had a.
Thanks, guys. I had a question. I was at our department meeting for geography, planning, and environment, and we happen to have the vice provost visiting for a random reason. But so we were discussing this, and most of the discourse was focused around how this is like it's not anti-anglophones, but like anti-non-francophone. This is like the language laws politics. But then hearing from you guys, I'm getting that since it will be eventually to all students, we assume, then it's generally anti-student. I'm just wondering because that kind of changes what the mobilization looks like.
Yeah,
Like where this is coming from.
it's definitely nuanced, and I think the Catholic government knows that it hasn't been super clear because they've been getting a lot of questions from the institutions and from the union. So they know that they haven't been very clear, and it's not the first time that they've proposed a bill or implemented a bill without much clarity. So I understand why there's it's just not clear. But basically, it definitely absolutely plays into the language issue. What they're saying is that they want to bolster the Francophone university sector by redistributing these funds. Also, they're saying that essentially that English-speaking students, this is basically a direct quote from François Legault, that English-speaking students in Quebec overall are a threat. You know, I think, again, to paraphrase what they said, looking at numbers in the 30s of thousands and upwards to them, they just see that as a threat. They don't give further justification really, other than more more people from outside Quebec equals more English in the streets of Montreal. And I mean, let's not lie, they certainly make Montreal to be a boogeyman to the rest of the province. So it is a language issue, that's absolutely correct. It's just that it's just the reality is that the Francophone schools don't have many international students or out-of-province students that are not already exempt through the agreements with France and Belgium. So whereas a huge university, say the University of Montreal, gigantic university, will have an extremely small percentage of non-Francophone students, essentially, and there are international students. So their programs will simply be less effective. And this has thankfully been acknowledged by those Francophone institutions. They've also come together and written an open letter in support of the Anglophone institutions because no one essentially at this point disagrees that the impact will be greater felt by Anglophone institutions, particularly the smaller ones. So that's really just bishops primarily, other than the small programs at McGill and Concordia as well. Hopefully that gives a little bit of clarity, but it's confusing, and the government is sowing division, so the confusion is purposeful. They don't want it to be very clear. They want people to be upset, to blame, whether it's Anglo, they don't, they're like immigrants, Anglophones, international students, anyone non-French. They're all the problem. Basically the picture they're painting to their base.
Yeah, I'll add quickly because I think that I did mention something about this. Yes, absolutely. As Alexandra pointed out, like this has a lot to do with the language politics in Quebec. I think that from like an organizing perspective, I do think that it's very intentional in a way that this was done, that these increases in tuition are being done in a way that brings in language politics. So like I think that tuition increases are probably in the interests of the Quebec government regardless, and by making it about language politics, it like deeply confuses the situation and is going to create so many rifts between communities, which I think is personally, I think that's a very intentional move. And that's why, bringing up that this is about like understanding the power, the collective power that students have and being afraid of that. And by making it about language politics and only raising tuition for non-Francophone individuals, that they're hoping to kind of divide the student movement in Quebec in like one way or another, and really target students that don't generally have that same understanding of the history of their mobilizing abilities here. So international students, out of province students that maybe don't know that in Quebec, student unions, for example, have certain legal acknowledgements. So we're represented as a student union, as a legal entity. And so we have the legal right, like labor unions, to go on strike and to take these actions, but that's not necessarily the case in other countries and other provinces. So by making this, about language politics, it makes things very complicated, but it also kind of, I don't know, it separates the movement a little bit, which I think is going to be something we're going to have to combat together.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, and just one last thing to add on what's been said already. For the moment, it seems like there are many Francophone unions, specifically at UQAM, that are showing solidarity and are in support of the Anglophone unions and Anglophone universities because they can see that the government is clearly trying to divide us. And at the moment, that is not working, and let's just all hope it stays that way.
If I can just add on to, I just wanted to touch on something that Adam mentioned earlier. For years, there's been a fight in Quebec for free education. And so this tuition increase is just another wave in the government trying to combat that movement. And so the way I see it is a tuition hike for these specific segments of the student population is an attack on all students. They're targeting us first, but they will come for the Francophone students next, without a doubt. They've done it before. We've seen this play out time and time again. Every 5-10 years, they do the same thing over and over again. And we've won before, so we can win again. The crucial point is just trying to unite as many students as possible.
Hi friends, I'm Jay from the SCPSA, School of Public Affairs. I have a statement and a question. So I guess first the statement is I'm a Quebec resident, but I really see this as an urgent issue because there's this behavioral pattern the CAC has had in their term, which is around acting with impunity and sort of not caring because we have a good enough majority, it doesn't matter. This is a really urgent issue for students because if we can't organize around tuition, the most fundamental common issue among all students, then I believe will be perceived by the government as not being able to organize against anything. No student movement will be taken with any seriousness by the government if we can't organize around tuition. My question, which is kind of more logistical, is I appreciate the CSU, thank you for organizing this town hall. We're gonna have to start getting down and dirty. I think we have 26 active student associations with 36 or 37 student associations. We're gonna start getting down and dirty with special assemblies, and I'm just wondering what role is either the CSU or ASFA maybe going to be playing in coordinating that, or is it kind of something that really we should start pushing for on a more independent level?
I'm very glad that you asked this question because I think that we were, thank you to the CSU for this because I think this is really a first step in trying to coordinate our actions. And for those of you that don't know, you're kind of represented by a few different tiers of union spaces. So if you're an arts and science student, you're represented by your department, as well as your faculty, as well as the Concordia Student Union. So there's all of these different ways that you can get involved in organizing and all of these unions that can kind of represent you. But the most on the ground one is really at the department basis. So that's really where hopefully a lot of mobilization can begin and come from. In terms of our roles at the CSU and ASFA, I think first and foremost is to listen to students and how they want this mobilizing to be organized. So, I would love to hear from if people have ideas, but also just to, coordinate collaboration. And I think, personally, I think it would be great to have a lot of communication and coordinated action on that front. But obviously this has to come from the departments first, work its way up with any kind of movement like this. But, being a part of a larger student union, we do have the resources to be able to organize like conversations and stuff like this. So I think that really that's going to be, at least in part, our role moving forward is just trying to bring everybody together, have discussions, and decide like what our strategy is going to be moving forward, and then trying to like bring everybody together to be on a similar front.
Just because I know that some people might be coming and going for classes, I will mention this again at the end, but related to your question, thus far, besides, students mobilizing and their member departments and that, what the CSU is doing in terms of that is we are endorsing a protest for this coming Monday, so please come to that. We'll speak a bit more about that at the end. And we are also endorsing a official National Assembly petition along with CSU and Bishop's Student Union. So more information on that to come. But in the meantime, while students are kind of looking more to organize, we have those two options on the table as well coming up.
So hi, my name is Irene. I also want CSU for organizing this town hall. I have lots of questions. Hopefully they don't just get all muddled and stuff. I really like the questions that other people have brought up as well. I think they have excellent questions that everyone should be asking themselves. So you mentioned that the UCAM is favorable to us. I wanted to know a little bit more about what other schools have been contacted, what other universities, and even CJEPs as well. I think we could even go that far, right? Like the bigger we spread this, the more numbers we have, right? And this is an issue that affects everybody. I'm happy that people have been calling this out for what it is. This is division. This is language-based division. And yes, it does start with, out-of-province students, Anglophone students, Indigenous students, it starts with immigrant students, and it's gradually, pulls everybody down. Right? That's the importance of solidarity on issues like this. I also wanted to know, along with the student unions at other schools, what workers' unions have been contacted here. And I do think workers have something to lose from this type of policy being passed. Some of you pointed out that there's departments and programs that are looking that they would be shut down as a result of this. And again, as we've mentioned, it's a domino effect from there. It's a ripple effect. So every worker has something to lose down the line from something like this. So I do think we could benefit from contacting the workers' unions here. And I think we could even go so far as to call a strike. One-day strikes have been shown to be very ineffectual, like they did this with France earlier this year, the big protest they had from the age of retirement reform. And I think what would be really interesting if we called a strike is that not only would this lend so much power and credence to our movement, this is how we run free, nationalized healthcare in Canada was through mass worker mobilization. This is May 1968. All the wins of May 1968 in Europe was won through workers' movements, even if it started as a student protest. And if we're gonna have a strike, we should spread it and we should make it general. And I think this would also kind of test the university's call for, solidarity with us in this moment, right? Because open letters only go so far. Like you mentioned, there's been backroom kind of like closed door dealings. And I think we should call for transparency, definitely on behalf of the provincial government. Where is this money going? What is the evidence that it would be put towards other social services? I doubt it. It goes towards subsidies and bailouts. And so, I think if we called a strike, I think it would force the university to take a position. Are they going to side with the workers on this if they go to strike? Or are they going to not, right? And I think it would expose their hypocrisy in that moment, or it would force their hand to do more for this movement, right? I'm really happy that someone brought out that, of course, workers, students from imperialized countries are going to be disproportionately affected, as a result of the devaluation of their currency. This is a racist policy. We should also call that out for what it is. And I think that was pretty much everything I had to say. So thank you for listening to my question from your local communist at the Socialist Fight Club.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all the feedback and suggestions. I'm really glad you were able to say them all here in this forum. I think in terms of like answering your first question or two, and especially since you touched on transparency, I'd love to just be transparent about that. This news was announced during our fall reading week, if I'm not mistaken, maybe towards the end of our fall reading week. In those 2 weeks since, besides putting a town hall together, we have been in touch with a wide number of student unions. We've also been on the receiving end of certain groups, not all of them student unions, different, whether research groups, community groups, whatever. Some meetings have happened in the sense that like we're getting these groups together and it's like preliminary meetings. Follow-up meetings are to come though, just the reality of like working within the last, 10-ish business days. Try not to harass people on weekends and stuff. So within that time frame, like we're in preliminary meeting mode, preliminary discussions, even both internally and externally at Concordia. But of course, we've been working closely with CMU, and I basically just agree with the bulk of your suggestions. I think this could be widespread. I think colleges should be very in tune with this situation. Hopefully, they will be soon. I think specifically answering for like what the Francophone University Associations like, it's kind of. Yes, well, they certainly already endorsed the protest on Monday. Again, please all be there. So we do have support for that. But again, I just don't want to speak for any other like union or association. As you can see, even just here at the CSU, we're having this like forum for the membership. The other unions are going to do the same, and I don't want to speak for anyone. But like, if you're wondering about solidarity and how that's looking, it's looking good. And what we all want is to continue working together and spreading this as largely as possible. In terms of like a general strike, again, thank you for the suggestion. I hope that your member associations and faculty associations, you'll be able to work with your fellow members on that, and the CSU will be there to support in all the ways that we can. I don't know if anyone else wants to speak to that feedback.
And then I know there's other questions, so I'll keep it very brief. But yeah, in terms of collaborating, like things are happening so fast right now. There's a lot to consider and a lot of like needing to make sure that we are acting quickly, but also going about things through the right avenues and not necessarily having only like the CSU and like SMU, for example, making decisions for all of their membership, since it's a pretty huge number of students and it's very difficult to, as just like union executives, kind of try to plan something as big as this. So I think it's going to be a little bit of a process in terms of like people coordinating within their membership and then amongst each other for things like a strike, a general strike. So I think that the steps that we're going through right now are pretty promising. There seems to be a lot of solidarity. There's a protest happening on Monday. And I think that's going to be a very good way to bring a lot of people together, have a lot of discussions, and then really take a step back and think strategically how we're going to move forward and how we're going to do that collaboratively. But that, this is really just like a first step in hearing feedback or taking notes. And, the more students that say like, why aren't we striking about this? We should do this, gives more power to us to like start coordinating and planning those kinds of actions. Right? So thank you for your comments.
Yeah, I'll kind of touch on that just before I pass to the next question too. I really think the best thing that students can do right now is to get involved in their member associations and start mobilizing students within your own departments to go on strike, because that's going to be the most effective tactic. If we can get enough departments on strike with enough students actually participating and supporting, that's a whole other thing. Like if we on paper are on strike and we have maybe 10 students who organize it and they're so excited, but then the rest of the membership isn't fully aware and isn't in support of the strike, that's not going to yield the successful results that we want. So we have to make sure that we're moving about this in a very strategic and methodical manner. So yeah, get involved. I'm going to have a sign-up sheet specifically for the CSU campaigns department. We're doing a lot of the behind the scenes, like mobilization work. And so that's stuff like flyering, making classroom announcements, pasting posters around the city, like all that kind of like legwork. We need people to help us out and support that kind of work. There's also going to be a teach-in here on November 16th. We're going to be talking more so about the legacy of the Quebec student movement. We're going to talk about some of the tactics that were employed and how we can use those tactics again. So if that's something that you're interested in that like very nitty gritty organizing, yeah, keep an eye out for that. There's the protest on Monday. We're already talking about a protest, and I'd love to do a one-day strike at the end of November, but we need to get some strike votes pushed through. So if we want to make that happen, we need to hit the ground running right now.
Hey, thanks. My name is Becca. I'm from an unnamed labor organization currently in a post I cannot say. I just wanted to comment first on thank you everyone for talking about division. I think this attack on international students and out-of-province students not only reflects the language politics, but also is on the back of a Canada-wide increase in xenophobia against international students who are being blamed for the housing crisis right now. So this all fits together, and they're trying to erode our collective rights by attacking the most vulnerable first. I'm glad to see solidarity on this. Two pieces of information that might be useful. One is that nearly all of the Concordia labor unions are currently in negotiation, which means they will have upcoming strike mandates and the ability to legally go on strike. So it's a key moment for solidarity between labor unions and student unions. This is a double-edged sword because it means that they're very focused on winning what they need to win for their agreements, and the university is being extremely inflexible on monetary issues this year. So they're kind of focused on that, but there's possibility. And I also wanted to note that the Concordia has already emailed the faculty about Monday's strike, basically telling them to use their discretion. It's quite a softly worded email. And whatever the syllabus says is sort of the default, but they have the freedom to change that if they wish. And then I have one clarifying question that we need to answer. I understand that it will be affecting students who enroll from now on. Will it affect students who are currently enrolled at different levels?
Yes, great question. Thank you for asking. Super important to really for everyone to understand. If you are an international student or an out-of-province student and you're looking to make significant changes to your degree, it is a possibility that you may not be grandfathered into the basic maintaining your current tuition rates. So what a clear example of that could look like is if you are currently an art compliance student looking to transfer, say you're in economics in arts and science, and you're looking to transfer to economics in John Wilson, what we've been told by the administration is that effective, like when you start that'll be a degree change that will trigger you to pay the new tuition fees. That's not the only type of example. That certainly applies to master's degrees. At this time, the government has said that if you pay basically lower rates, whatever you may be paying, depending on your situation currently as an undergrad, those will not apply to your master's degree, unfortunately, even if you stay at Concordia. But again, for those of you who are looking to make changes in your undergraduate degree, super important to know that, you might want to inquire several times before making those changes with your advisors, because it could cause you to have to pay the new fee. So sorry that I can't provide more specific examples on that, but that's really important to know. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to add also, based on the Concordia communications, they said, yeah, it's starting, next academic year, but that there's also going to be a 5-year grace period. So for students that are currently enrolled, there's 5 years basically that you have to complete your degree. And, as somebody that's in their 5th year, I know that can get stretched out, and a lot of students are working as well. Part-time students take significantly longer than 5 years, so it definitely can affect students that are currently already enrolled. So that is important to know.
I don't have the exact details, but from what I recall, like Alexander said, so if you're fine now in your undergrad, but then you do a master's or PhD, it can change your status, but not in research graduate degrees. So there's certain faculties that aren't that concerned about it for obvious reasons, and other ones that really are. So, yeah.
I'd say just double check as the situation is evolving. And I also forgot to mention independent students. That's unclear at this time. If you are an independent student or looking to become an independent student and then transfer into a degree or certificate program afterwards, you'll want to triple make sure, clarify before September 2024, whether that'll cause you to have a change in tuition fees as well.
Just before I take the next question, I'm going to be passing around a sign-up sheet. So if you're interested in getting involved in mobilization, like I was talking about, put your information down here and I'll reach out to you.
Hi there, my name is Allegra. I'm an executive at VEST, and I am curious what we can do as member associations to help aid and kind of mobilize for the strike. Do we have to call an assembly? I heard you mention about maybe ask for a CSU putting on not a teach-in, but like a gathering among the members associations, and I think that would be really helpful. But externally from that, is there anything that we can do as executives to help that?
Yeah, okay. So I'll answer briefly. So in terms of the action on Monday, from what I understand, basically I don't think any unions have had the capacity to call an official strike for the Monday action. So I mean other groups are calling it a strike, but I think it's like our communications we're calling it a walkout, because based on the time constraints, there hasn't been the possibility for any unions to like gather and do proper promotion for the membership to call a strike. So that's what's happening for the Monday action. But in terms of getting involved, we're hosting a banner painting event this Friday at the CSU Art, which is just down the hall over here. So if anybody wants to come and talk more, I think that'll be a really good space to talk about strategy moving forward and thinking about like how we can mobilize our members associations and how we can collaborate. And then I think that it's going to be really important for us to organize a meeting following the strike on Monday, or the action, whatever we want to call it, on Monday, with as many unions at Concordia that want to come to the table and talk about how we can collaborate there. But definitely, right now, I think the big stage we're at is like sharing information, telling students, making sure they know what's happening, and then providing avenues for kind of like feedback and conversation so that we can, especially as union executives, kind of be informed by our membership and make sure that going forward planning these actions, that we actually have the support of the students that we're representing in order to like effectively plan. Yeah.
I just want to clarify something really quickly. It's just to make sure that the language we're using is accessible to everyone. Basically, for anyone who might not totally know, strike has somewhat legal implications for student unions, and particularly like the way that the administration sees it. So the reason that, for example, we're advertising a protest on Monday, but saying that we don't have the capacity to call a strike is because the major difference is the cancellation of classes that is recognized by the university. So what's happening on Monday is we are protesting along with many other unions. However, none of these unions have a strike mandate, which essentially means that no one's canceling classes. But as was mentioned, hopefully faculty will be understanding at all of the different institutions, and we still recommend that you go on this protest, all else being equal, unless you maybe have like a midterm that you can't fail. Obviously, it's understandable. So that's kind of the difference in between what we're discussing.
Can I just ask briefly, by like a show of hands, who knows what a strike is or has ever attended like a vote to go on strike? Okay, so lots of people, but not everybody. So yeah, like Alexandra mentioned, I think it's important to note, I kind of touched on this earlier, but student unions in Quebec do have, are recognized as legal entities. And in order for us to actually exercise the power that we have as these like legal bodies, there's a lot of avenues that we have to go through in order to keep things official. So we have our we have voting for our executives, and like I'm sure that you see, voting happening every year for your executives and whatnot. So there's that, but the other thing is strikes and general assemblies, which basically means a certain percentage that's determined of the membership. So let's say it's 2% of all ASPA members, which is about 13,000 students, would have to come physically and attend this meeting in order to have a legally binding vote to cancel class. So by holding a special meeting called a general assembly or a special general assembly or whatever it is under whatever kind of like policies you're following, that gives us the power as a student union to say, hey, we held our 2% of our membership in this room, hybrid, whatever, and they voted at that time to go on strike. And we can prove that to you, to the university, to the Quebec government that we did that, and that gives a legal backing to what we're doing when we're striking, more so than when we're having a protest. It's a lot more on individuals to take it upon themselves to not attend their classes. So that puts a lot more pressure on the actual action that we're doing, and it also gives the ability for things like picket lines and actually blocking classes. So really enforcing the strike is what we call it, which is when you, block access to classes that have a strike mandate, so that students that may not be involved, may not have attended the general assemblies, know that their union is actually on strike and that they shouldn't be attending those classes. They've actually voted not to be there, and that if students want to have further discussions about that, we need to encourage that they do attend these kinds of meetings of the membership. So that's kind of a bit of context about strikes. And so because it's based on percentages, that's why we really encourage department-based meetings, because in order to call a strike for like ASPA or for the CSU, it's a huge number of students that we would need to call and gather, and it would also be representing a huge number of students that wouldn't be present. So it's important that when you start at a smaller base, that you're actually engaging a larger percentage of your membership, and that more people know what you're doing and why you're going on strike and all of those things, and that ideally if, say 10 or 15 out of 30 departments in ASPA go on strike, then we're able to say, hey, okay, there's a backing for ASPA to call a strike mandate, and all of those people that have already voted are going to come to this meeting, and so on and so forth. So that gives a bit more context about strikes and why we're not really at the stage of calling a strike yet, but that with actions like the protest on Monday, that it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I'd just like to hear some more feedback from folks who maybe haven't gotten the chance to speak yet and who wanted to maybe speak about how this might affect them or considerations that you haven't heard the student union bring up yet. Awesome, thanks guys.
Hi, my name is Robert, and I'm actually a Quebec resident, so personally it doesn't affect me, but at the same time, I'm a regular at the Multi-Faith Spirituality Center, where most of the students are international students, and I'm concerned that in the long term that those services will be affected if fewer people are going to be coming to Concordia. That I'm concerned that will maybe to cut the services, and I just ask, how do you think this will impact such services such as the MFSC?
I've already gotten inquiries from student groups on campus, not so much the university as of yet, but as when the university says they're losing tens of millions of dollars, you can imagine that the first thing to be gutted will be student services of all the different types of varieties. But I've also received inquiries, just so you're all aware, this is very real fear. Some of your student groups and faculty associations are looking at their fee levies going down, right? Because enrollment drops, fee levies drop. And what is normally consistent, right, as student groups or nonprofits, so normally our income is extremely consistent. It's essentially mainly the same thing every year. And that guarantees the longevity that we have. Enrollment goes down, this is one of the few existential threats that student groups get to funding. And then they have to, not that student groups are necessarily well-versed in doing this or have a lot of experience, but they will have to start budgeting for decrease. And I have received inquiries from groups who are prepared to do that for as soon as next Frosh, like looking at decreasing their budget for the orientation for September 2024. So that's certainly a very real concern to have. Yeah, thank you for that question.
Yeah, and just one more word about fee levies. So for those of you that may not be aware of fee levies, basically it's an amount that you pay, a set amount that you pay per credit for services. So there's a lot of CSU-based fee levies that you pay. For example, the People's Potato is based off of a fee levy, and so that's directly tied to enrollment. So as many credits as there are being taken at the school per se, that's how much money we're going to get for that. So if enrollment's being projected to drop by upwards of 60%, that's going to be upwards of 60% of the revenue that fee levies would normally get. So it will definitely have a huge impact.
Awesome. All right, well, thank you so much for hosting this meeting. I'm usually not involved in student activism, but in this case, I know this is going to be bad for Concordia and for Montreal as a whole. That's going to do more harm than good. And that is why I'm like, that's about that. I really need to get involved in something and just hope for the best. But things keep continuing to escalate. Well, I don't know. All to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hello. I was just wondering, from your perspective, what does the Quebec government want, or what are they seeking to do, and is there, some way to kind of, I don't know, fulfill a certain part of what they're looking to do?
I can present that. I think a couple of us want to answer that. I think the real goal of the Quebec government right now, aside from defunding Anglo institutions, is also to just divide us, because there has been like a line that there have been like some discussions with people at other schools and associations and student unions at other schools, and some of them have been like, oh, well, we're going to get, like, because part of the Quebec government scheme is to send the increase in tuition that will be collected to some of these French institutions. And a lot of the student associations, though, at the moment are like, okay, but that's stupid. So I think but there's definitely some people that are going to be like, hey, cool, my school's going to be better funded. But I think at the moment that's not happening. People are understanding that this is like insane. And that's
I mean, I had a slightly different answer in the sense that I guess it's complex, but at the same time simple in that they are playing to their base. Like the more complex question is like, why does it work out for them to like, why is this for them to have these subsequent bills, Bill 21, Bill 96, all the division they're throwing with language, why does that play to their base? I think you also asked like maybe what we could give like leverage or like see. I'm not sure the last part of your question, but you were basically asking like.
I mean, if it's truly about language,
right,
we could adapt.
Right.
To teach people like a stronger.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly, and that's been the position of the institutions and the unions, and I think that's where their argumentation falls apart, in my personal opinion, because if it were truly about what they call reversing the decline of the French language or promoting the French language, they would be looking to us they would be looking to fund those services to help the languages, and also, I'm not sure if you heard, but a great example of this and how it's playing out is that McGill was ready to invest over $50 million in a French program. In fact, even here at Concordia, we just opened a brand new office for Francophone students, I believe this year, or at least very recently. Basically, the institutions are prepared to help kind of what we call constancy their campus communities, but the government's not reciprocal. Like they don't receive that information very well, and that's where their arguments start to fall apart. They told McGill to essentially, or what the fallout essentially was, is that McGill has to now shelve the $50 million Francisation program because of these tuition hikes. So kind of make it make sense. Their argumentation also kind of goes in circles because they claim that the decline of the French language is because graduates stay in the province and anglicize it, but they're simultaneously claiming that they subsidize education for people who come and leave and don't care about Quebec. So which is it? You know, do people stay? Do people leave? What's your problem here? And I guess finally what I'll say on that is that behind the scenes, I know that the statistics that the government uses are disputed by our institutions. We have a research, I don't know if it's an institute or we have a research group in any case at Concordia that looks specifically at English language issues in Quebec. And there's other groups like that that exist in Quebec, and their numbers don't match up to the numbers that the Quebec government uses. When the CSU was at the National Assembly about 4 weeks ago, trying to defend our international students' right to the PEQ program, one of the commissioners from the PQ party literally told us that he would personally make sure that we received the statistics of the government and their interpretation of the statistics, essentially condescendingly telling us that we just don't know how to read statistics, and when we dispute their reasoning, that that it's just a miscomprehension on our part, not that we're just actively disputing the way that they manipulate their stats.
I think maybe one last thing on that is that the government also faces a lot of pressure from the French universities to give them more funding. And so they're trying to figure out how to do that without, increasing the base level of that and making them just pay more, which is what would happen if these things were implemented. So it's a way of, because it's kind of a complex process of how there's like these base level tuition rates set and money goes into the government and gets dispersed by the government and all these funding formulas, which they're currently reevaluating. But essentially within that process, there's like discrepancies between English and French institutions. And so from the government side, I don't know, but my guess is like, yes, they're getting pressured from that side as well to come up with more money to fund them. And so this is a way to appease them and their student body with, the consequences from all I do. So that's a guess from that side.
Hi, my name is David. Thank you very much for having this meeting. I was simply wondering, what do you actually mean when you say you're trying to divide us? Because clearly there's a higher kind of position, there's a higher agenda trying to be pushed by the government, right? Again, you were talking about the base, right? But like, what is the base of the government? Which direction are they trying to actually establish their politics, especially when they're trying to literally take more money from the students, international students coming from countries, that like they can barely afford their basic necessities. And I've heard stories of people coming here in Canada, and like entire communities are depending on these people here in Canada to be able to actually have their studies. It's already a lot of pressure with austerity, inflation, and rising cost of living. Tuition going up doesn't make any sense, right? So it's a unilateral issue on every single front, not only for students but also for workers, right? So when you're saying they're trying to divide us, what here is the end goal of the government?
The populist conservative government.
Can I address something he said? His very short phrase. What you said was and still may be true, but I stay aware and I can keep myself educated with the media.
You want the mic?
Well, I have a good voice, but independent media, community media, and mainstream media, and I read that, or even heard on the radio that, I was probably reading that, yes, they may have been more expensive, turning, like more money from the international students, but it seems that it's not true all across the board anymore, because there's something going on in some university, is it University of Quebec or whatever, that some students in Quebec are paying more than international students. Now, what's up with that? That's all I have to say. And a little ditty. Okay, not everybody that comes here knows, well, it says CSU, so I was aiming for here. So maybe you can also have like 7th floor or something. That's all on the flyer.
Fair enough. I think divide us, I think what we were talking about before is divide the student movement. I think the Quebec government, like was touched on earlier, is well aware of the strength of the student movement, both in terms of like, just mobilization, but also legal rights. And my own personal opinion, which people might disagree with, I think that the French side of the student movement is a lot stronger than the Anglophone one in the province, and the Quebec government can see that. And so if they can find a way to increase tuition that brings in funding to, like, it gives less funding to the Anglophone universities and more funding to the French universities, and we don't have Francophone students signing on with us, which thankfully so far it's not the case, it's the opposite. But if they can do that, they know that they're going to have a less strong movement to oppose them, right? So that's, in terms of division, like, I think that's where it lies. And like I think Adam touched on earlier, it's probably, this is just one piece. And if they can push this through, and then they'll increase other, like, groups of other tuition later on, knowing that they could, like, the student movement could be divided and got defeated on something like this. So I think the division here is between the English and the French students because of the effect it would have on the university system.
I'm going to add something very quickly, and then I think we'll try to have more questions and comments from the audience. But I mean, I think that's a very, like, deeply political and philosophical question that I don't think that this panel can necessarily answer. But that, yeah, basically we're needing to address the issue, but yeah, we don't have all of the answers as to like why this is happening, and it's, addressing tuition hikes is the basis of a lot of other social issues, right? Like, people are talking about the cost of living is massively going up, all of these things are happening at the same time, it's going to disproportionately affect certain groups, right? So we know all of those things, but also I think this is like points to why it's really important that we have connections within our faculty and within like academics and professionals within the university that do study these kinds of things, study like different, I guess it's like politics in general, but the Quebec context and why certain movements are, trying to be stifled, and like what the benefits of that would be for the Quebec government. But I think our positioning as students is really that, we know that this is something that has continuously happened. It's really not, the reasoning may be complex, but the answer isn't that complex, which is that we don't need tuition hikes. They don't need to be raising tuition, and we don't want it, and it's just going to disproportionately affect marginalized students. And so it's kind of as simple as that. I think we can get into like why this is happening, but that we don't always need to in order to address it, right?
Thanks for hosting this. Sort of this question has already been addressed, but there seems to be some lingering confusion about for out-of-province students, whether it only affects Anglophone students or Anglophone schools, or any out-of-province student going to any university within Quebec. And so that was my first question. And then secondly, I just wanted to ask, is there any, because I'm a master's student in the MFA program, is there any issues with master's students getting involved with the CSU union? Because it's, I think my understanding is you guys represent undergrad students, or vice versa, like undergrads getting involved in master's student union.
Yeah, so for your first question, I know that the media has reported on this in a number of ways. Like, you read some articles and it really makes it sound like all these tuition hikes are only affecting the Anglophone institutions. It confused me a number of times, and that's why I had to ask the administration and government relations people a number of times, and I've always found the same answer, which is that this affects, the tuition hikes apply to all the universities. That's the answer I've found consistently from official sources. It's the disproportionate impact is just because of the proportion of international or out-of-province students at each school. But yeah, as we've kind of been speaking to, like, this is, especially 10 years after the 2012 proposed tuition hikes where they did include like Quebec students in that tuition hike, I think that this current government is aware of that. And despite the fact that it's a new government, I think it knows the lessons that it learned from 2012. And instead of just throwing universal tuition hikes at everyone all at once, it's going to target who they know is a very, very small demographic in the francophone schools, so that those unions don't kind of, as we said, stand in solidarity with the movement. So thank you for that question. And the second question, I wouldn't say that it was ever really a problem. What I would say is that we work with the GSA. We try to always work with the GSA. Of course, I encourage you as a member of the GSA to, stay close to your union and see what they'll do about this. But I can let you know that we are working on this together in conjunction with many other unions. And I would, just generally, I think there's a very normal and natural allyship between the GSA and the CSU, of course.
Yeah, and I would encourage anybody, you could pass it on, I was just gonna say while you're passing it up. So yeah, get involved in whatever groups, maybe closest to you and your community. If you happen to see things from the CSU more than the GSA, like, I don't think anybody's gonna be upset about like having more people and more community members. The only times that it's really important that you are a member is when we're having a vote at a general assembly or something like that. Otherwise, I don't think anybody's like separating us into little circles, and we need to collaborate anyways.
And I just want to say one more thing, a bit touching on the last question. It's very important to mention that back in 2012 and before that, there have been like big movements for free education. And the reason why is free education, especially in Quebec, is not that expensive. In 2012, it was estimated it would be like 600 million. Now, a 2022 estimated, like for everybody at all levels. And for 2022, it's been updated to 1.2 billion. That's not a lot of money in the context of Quebec government's budget. So that's just something that everybody should keep in mind when mobilizing this.
So hi again, Irene from Socialist Fight Back here. So what I'm hearing is that if we want to really have maximum unity between students and workers, we're going to need to get a strike authorization. And that is, as you mentioned, there's quite a bit of mobilizing to get there, right? It's not an overnight thing. And so I'm really happy that this protest is planned for Monday. We're mobilizing our members to attend the protest, organizing a contingent. And I really think we should take advantage of the steam that this has right now. And what I might suggest towards that end is forming a strike committee with your own representatives, let's say, representatives from other kind of student unions across Montreal province, workers unions, and kind of like getting them together to, ideally before this protest happens, to figure out how do you get the most out of this protest. You have a list of names that you've collected now as well. And so I think at this protest, what might be good is having people like, let's say, pair up and talk to every single person at that protest in terms of getting them involved. Here's what you could do. We're thinking of having a strike vote on this day. Can you make it? Like, really, really get that out there. Because my biggest fear here is that this would lose steam and it doesn't go anywhere. And I definitely don't want to be fatalist. I don't think we have to be fatalists at all. I'm not thinking about like, oh, how is tuition gonna go up for me? Like, I'm just trying, it's out of my brain right now because we're not there yet. And yeah, I'll wrap this up because I know a lot of other people probably want to speak, and I definitely want to hear what you have to say. I really appreciate the thoroughness of your answers to the past questions. But yeah, I guess what I'm thinking is like a committee of people on these different bodies, and these bodies should trickle it down to their membership. Should get people mobilized from their membership to do posterings, flyerings, things like that, right? Like this movement does need leadership. It cannot be counted on every single individual, right? To walk out of their class or find time to go postering, right? It has to be centralized to some degree. It has to be planned. So yeah, a committee like this would be great, especially in advance of this protest, to get like the maximum number of people agitated and knowledgeable about a strike vote at that protest, so that it doesn't just become the biggest manifestation of the anger, and then every subsequent kind of event about this just puts it out. Those were my thoughts.
Yeah, we'll definitely take into consideration your suggestions for bringing more people to come together and whether that can be done in like a group format. I'll just say that the process we were referring to, I know we didn't get into all the details yet, but it's for this Monday. So I don't know that for this Monday we'll be able to do that, but not to worry, that was intended as, that was a grassroots student initiative and it was intended as just a first step. Luckily, because it's been so well received, it's pretty big for a first step. But I think subsequently you're absolutely right. So we'll keep all that in mind. Thank you so much.
Yeah, just to also respond, like there is an informal like mobilization committee that is like in the process of forming. Like we literally have a meeting later today between like a bunch of different associations. I think you're right that it would be great to involve workers in these conversations. We just haven't been able to take that step because the workers that are the most applicable to this specific context, like Becca already mentioned, are in the process of negotiations for their collective agreements and are like very, very busy.
Yeah, hi again. I think what I'm going to say is kind of evident, but like on the Francosphere, we haven't really gotten any pushback yet. They're with us and everything. But when I first read the news about like the doubling of the tuitions, I was like, this sort of sets a precedent for other people who are like, down the line might get the doubling of their tuition because the government realized that we didn't fight well enough or hard enough. So I think, going forward, that's kind of the narrative we should push for. Although it does sound like fear-mongering, but it does have, some grounding and some fact in there. So I don't see why we can't, have a global front or a similar front for everybody going forward. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that we're pretty lucky that the Francophone universities do understand that context, and that based on, the history of tuition hikes in Quebec, that we can see through it pretty easily that it's like, this is something that's going to happen in phases and it will affect everyone eventually, and that we have an opportunity to unite on that in order to fight it. Otherwise, yeah, it's gonna affect everyone. And so I completely agree, and I hope that that's something we can definitely like use narrative wise and in terms of like uniting everyone, that this is like fighting tuition hikes for all ultimately.
I don't think it's fear mongering at all, and in fact, I think a lot of students have the same interpretation as Lily said from other institutions as well, and I would say that is the narrative that's bringing us together for the purpose on Monday. But beyond that, I really just encourage everyone to keep spreading the word in that way, because it's absolutely true, right? And then it just, all of us get affected, funding wise, diversity, everything. It's just all going to be a big downhill for Quebec residents as much as anyone else if this passes. So I encourage you all to keep spreading the word, with your friends in classrooms, and say like, hey, like just because we're, all from Quebec doesn't mean that this doesn't affect us. It's absolutely going to affect us.
Hi, my name is Ava. I'm from the traditional unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, Coast Salish, and Tsuut'ina people, otherwise known as Vancouver. This is my 4.5 years here because I have 120 credits to complete because I am an out-of-province student. I have been thoroughly involved with this university. I love this university. I have done a lot for this university, and I just want to talk about spreading the word, as we're just kind of saying. Here in front of me, I have 2 emails, one for both on the Government of Quebec plans for tuition rates, one from the Concordia student communications team, and one from the McGill University principal and vice chancellor. So I just want to bring light to the issue that I have with how we are spreading this information and how seriously other universities like Bishop's University and McGill University are taking this issue compared to Concordia. Concordia's email only highlights that I, as a student, who's already in my program will not have tuition hikes. Quite frankly, I don't care about me. I care about everyone else that is going to come from other provinces and provide so many other benefits to classrooms that I've seen from other out-of-province students. I'm really passionate about that. In this, we see that this change will not affect you. I don't care. It affects lots of people. But basically, it gives only information about the degrees and frequently asked questions, and basically that grades are changing. Opposed to the McGill University email that honestly is so long that I don't think I have the time to read and I don't want to take that space. But some of these key sentences are, the one subheader is the power of an open Quebec society. We are concerned that in the government's announcement, prospective students from outside Quebec may hear that message that they are not welcome. Despite Montreal's reputation as a global education, global education destination, and the extraordinary contributions of students and alumni within Quebec. We are stronger when our doors are open. When we attract the brightest minds from Canada and the world, enticing and equipping them to build fulfilling, productive lives here. They have so much to share. Blah, 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 blah. Basically, McGillians care deeply about their universities, and I know that this announcement is concerning for many of us. We will engage with government and partners to address these proposals, seeking ways to strengthen all universities for the good of Quebec. Personally, reading this, it really disheartened me that a university that is not my own is really standing up and providing the support and encouragement for their students, and we are not. I think that this has so much ground for making change because it doesn't just go to, it has meaning to it. There are, I know, internal emails sent from the president to all the staff and administration. These emails outline that Concordia University highly denounces this change in tuition hikes and that they are all on board. I say, why isn't that sent to us? Why do I not feel supported by the administration? I know in the back of my mind that I am, but why is it not clear? Because the benefit of sending an email like this to your whole student body is that those that may not be aware that they are not out-of-province students will then gain the understanding, spread information, and that is grounds for a collective and movement, understanding, and ability to actually change what is going on. I am deeply, deeply disheartened by this tuition hike to begin with, but I'm even more upset with how the university hasn't made it clear that it's all of us together that need to survive this and need to fight back. So I just urge a more open conversation between the administration and the students. So thank you so much for listening. I'll hand it off, and I'm really excited to hear more. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like the Concordia University message is very sterile and very just providing the facts is who will be affected. So I definitely agree. I wasn't aware of the thoroughness of the McGill communications, but I think that especially the CSU executives, put you on the spot, but I think have more communication with the university. So I think that's definitely something that we can urge them and say that we expect more in terms of your statements of actually taking a stand against this, not just saying factually what's happening, right? So that's something that we can definitely and should do moving forward. I promise you I'll bring this up directly to the Vice Provost and the President. I may even use the footage if I can. Yeah, other questions?
Sorry, there's been a lot of talk about mobilization and obviously you guys coordinating with other unions and stuff like that, and how it's it's been 2 weeks basically since it's been announced, and it's taken a while to get everything together and get communication going. I was just wondering going forward if you had an idea of what the timeline was going to look like for mobilization. What if we do end up doing General Assembly and voting on a strike and stuff, when that would happen, how long that might last. 'Cause I know in the past it's lasted a while, and I'm curious to know, like, is this something that would take weeks, months, years? I don't like, just kind of a timeline so that students can get to resolution.
Yeah, great question. It's tricky to answer. Mainly, the main reason is because we have to base our mobilization realistically off of how fast this can or may pass at the government level. They do have a supermajority and they control the schedule of Parliament. So that means they can push through things pretty quickly if they want to, and they've done it in the past. I'm waiting to hear back about what they think, like because they have to have like sections where they look at it, they scrutinize it a little bit, and then they pass it. I'm waiting to hear back how long that'll take, because hopefully, the more time that takes, the more time we have to mobilize. And if I had to do any type of estimate in terms of what students need in terms of mobilizing, I know that certain like bylaws or regulations sometimes require like it might take a minimum of 30 days for some certain like things to pass. So hopefully the government's not, I don't think they're passing this before the end of before the winter, and hopefully that's true. So that we have until the winter to at least mobilize. But what I can say is that we are, as Juliana mentioned, we'll be discussing next steps beyond Monday, I guess starting today.
Yeah, I would say we don't. It's been a very hectic couple of weeks being involved in the student union, and things like timeline, honestly, haven't been established yet. So that's something that we're very much in the process of working on, is coming up with an appropriate timeline, coming up with appropriate, escalations of action. So already the protest is happening very quickly, and that's based very much on student initiative, which is really, really awesome. But I think that we're going to have to really think seriously about the timeline that's going to be both appropriately within the timeline of when this is going to be going to be discussed at Parliament, but also that's realistic for us to get enough students on board that we have a powerful enough movement that doesn't kind of do the opposite of what we wanted to do, which is show that we do have collective power instead of showing that we actually, we can call a general strike at the CSU, for example, but then that everybody still attends class. That's not going to look good for us. So it's really about making sure that we have a timeline that is timely, that we're going to be addressing this, but that it also is actually backed by all of the on the ground work that needs to happen for that to be successful. But I would say realistically, it's going to be within the months kind of timeline.
Jay, School of Community Public Affairs. The thing that worries me about department level organizing is my program. We have 3 programs totaling 225 students. We're very mobile. We're very active. I have no doubt that in the next 3 to 4 weeks we could get a strike mandate. But then there's 200 of us, and we're very small compared to the Greater Concordia. I remember last year, I believe it was last year. My timeline could be off. We had could have been the year before. We were looking at a strike around the health policies in Concordia, and it was so messy, and there was very little cohesion. It was really difficult. We're we want to get our mandate, but what are the other departments doing? And I felt like there was no central voice around that. And so something that I think would be really helpful, and I don't know what level this would be through. Juliana mentioned, for example, the end of November having a 1-day strike, maybe even a 3 or 7-day strike, just putting it out there. But being able to have that, obviously you can't call it, but saying hey, we suggest that we call a strike on the state. Don't forget that your bylaws might stipulate a month. Call your GA, and having that centralized voice, so we could at least know hey, we're going to aim for the state. Let's rally our fellow departments to aim for the state. I think that would be something at least on the side of the CSA would be very, very helpful. Smaller departments would be very, very helpful. And then I guess another kind of thought would be I don't think there needs to be let's say that some departments are worried because maybe they've already used all of their General Assembly funds in the first year. Does ASPA have funds to support strike assemblies? And if so, could there be an email that goes out to the executives of departments to tell them don't be worried, call your special assembly, make this strike happen. We have funds to support this. And then maybe a last question to put out there, but it's very, very small, is What about Cruise? Adam, what's going on with Cruise? What's happening? Okay, that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'll answer the more ask the specific questions first. So yeah, it's very difficult to try and like you said, have a centralized kind of voice, but then also not impose things top down. So I think it's great to hear feedback. It's been great to see multiple like members association or department association executives here today to talk about this. But I'm hearing that people want to have a more centralized like discussion being organized. So like as an ASFA executive, I'm more than happy to take that on. I'm hearing you guys, so I think that's something that like I can begin planning, which is just kind of department-based meetings, like semi-regular check-ins, and trying to create a space where different departments can come together and like work on this. So yeah, I'm more than happy to plan that. And so you will be hearing from me shortly in terms of coordinating that. In terms of planning general assemblies, yeah, I mean, especially in times where like specific mobilization initiatives come up, usually what we have to do for changing budgets is like propose it to the finance coordinator. But there's ways that we can think about how moving budgets around for that, whether it comes with the ask, so like mobilization budget can absolutely be the case, or other events, initiatives, etc. So I don't think that would be the biggest problem. We'll just have to work together a bit there. And then yeah, I think that answers most of those things. So yeah, I'm hearing anybody that's an ASPA student. If you're not an ASPA student, I'm sorry, but I am talking about ASPA. But other faculty associations are structured a little bit differently. So if you are in another faculty association, like if you're in fine arts or you're in engineering, I would recommend going directly to your faculty association, since there's no departments in the same way, and talking to them about mobilizing and maybe sending them emails. Otherwise, you can always, join other initiatives from other faculties. Like I said, if you're not an art science student, but like we're organizing things, you're more than welcome to attend. And same with, CSU events, etc.
If you need help reaching out to your faculty association, if you're from ECA, CASA, let me know, and we'll put you guys in touch. And it's important that you guys talk to them as well. And we did not purposely not represent them today. That is a coincidence. So we hope that you involve them and speak with them as well, and we'll also be speaking with them on our end. I think Juliana had maybe some details about what the CSU could do.
Yeah, so don't mind me, I am not a CSU representative anymore. But I was last year, and I set a really cool precedent of using the SADIA funding that the CSU has called the SILC Fund. SSAELC, it stands for, oh my God, Student Space Accessible Education and Legal Contingency Fund. So basically, it's our reserve fund that we have that we can access in the case that students go on a long extended strike, or doesn't even have to be long and extended, but maybe one day. We were able to disperse some of that funding to student associations last year when they went on strike for a fall reading week. So it's something that there is a precedent for and that we can do again. So if there are student associations that are worried about funding, like the CSU has mechanisms to be able to help support them. So yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the prompt, Jay. So yeah, I would assume most people here don't know what CLEAR is. It's in French, it's Coalition of Resistance for the United Student Movement. That's the rough translation to English. It's basically the direct spiritual successor to the massive coalition that is responsible for the 2012 protests. Right now there are around 37,000 students and student unions that have joined from across the province. The biggest one is actually down the street. It's the Boston Student Union, and we're working on more affiliations. And the idea is that people come together. If your entire faculty joins, the idea is that a fee levy is passed and funds are directed into a massive organizing body that has the power to do strike. that's the main objective of a career. It's to concentrate the student movement power together, and the main goal of achieving what we want is striking. And right now, most of our like power and like energy is being directed at a strike for November 10th for paid internships. But in terms of getting support from to do to like end tuition hikes, that's very possible. We can talk about that later, how that relates to semester. Personally, but the idea is a lot of the student associations that have on to the protest for tomorrow are already members of COOR and have the power to vote for that to be an official part of our campaign. So it cannot just be Montreal students that go on strike. It can be basically the entire so-called province. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we have about 5 more minutes left, so maybe we can try to have 1 or 2 more questions.
Hello, John Paul here from the Concordia Board Games Club. Let's go. I really think that like universities' best things come out when you have a lot of people from a lot of different places, and they come together, they research things, bring in ideas from all over the world, and this seems to really hurt that. And I think that's a threat to like not only just Concordia, not only just McGill, but other universities, like the other universities as well. And that could hurt like the entire university education of Quebec. So I've got like my question is really, is there anybody even overlooking this in the federal government? Considering like McGill is one of Canada's, arguably the top university in Canada. And it's like that could really hurt them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to share all the information with you guys today. I guess I don't know how much context you guys have for the current federal Liberal Party. There's like a small part of the federal Liberal Party that's kind of like what is / was helping to defend kind of Anglo/immigrant rights in Quebec. Recently, one of them actually quit the Liberal Party after a prolific career over this exact issue. And one of the remaining members of Parliament who does advocate for you guys did ask to be here today, actually. So, Member of Parliament Anthony Hillsfather, I believe, asked to join us today. We basically asked that this would be a forum for students, but I would not be surprised that a number of politicians from probably several different parties at the provincial federal level may be there on Monday. And I mean, if you guys want that federal support, by all means, I very much encourage you to connect with your local MPs because, especially in the context of like Quebec, they, don't know when to break party lines to defend us, and they kind of also like if we don't even request for them to break party lines, then they won't certainly. But yeah, it's not super popular in Parliament to go against the government of Quebec, but there are some members of Parliament in local ridings that stand up for you. Was that the main question about the federal? Okay. Yeah.
Add one thing too, like it's always great to hear feedback from people about like what they think is important avenues for us to address. So if people want to see something like that does more directly target the federal government, not through like just different kinds of actions, right? We want to diversify in like what we're doing. There's always potential for things like call-ins, so we can like organize, an event where we encourage people to come and call their local MPs and encourage those kinds of things. So like, if that's something you're interested in, reach out to the CSU, say like, hey, I would love if you guys hosted something like this. And when we have students, like, sometimes it's just like a shot in the dark about whether students want to organize about something. So actually hearing like, yeah, students want to contact their MPs or whatever. It's good for us to hear that so we can organize something that does take, some collective, a little bit more collective power in doing that. So yeah, it's great to hear those comments. That's something that you're thinking about.
Yeah, for feedback about any sort of like mobilization efforts that you would like to see the CSU doing, you can email me at campaigns@csu.qc.ca. The email is also on the website, but it's just campaigns@csu.qc.ca.
We are at 1 o'clock, so I did want to do just like a few last notes just to recap. So for all of you who gave us feedback, thank you so much. We'll be reviewing our notes and probably the footage. And looking forward to connecting more with you guys and featuring these discussions. So the protest is at 1 o'clock on Monday, starting at Peel, Dorchester Square, which is on Peel. If you can't join us there, we will. That's correct. Please join us there. If you can't join us there, we will be walking back towards the hall building. So if you go to the Instagram or Facebook at Blue Falls Protest, you can see the full trajectory outline for the protest. But yes, we will be going from the initial location, walking to Concordia, then walking back up to McGill, ending at Roger Gates. Where we will potentially have some speakers. So if you can only meet us at McGill, please do it there. If you can only meet us at Concordia, please do so and spread the word.
And if you go to YouTube, the address for the live media is CUTV Montreal.
Local 514, we love them. We love them. Okay, petition coming very soon, like any day now. CSU will publicly put out the petition. That's with bishops and SMU, which goes directly to the National Assembly. Please sign that, spread the word. If we get 30,000 signatures, which is feasible with all of your help, if we get those amount of signatures, we will force the Quebec legislator into a debate on the issue of tuition hikes that will include François Legault having to answer directly to that. And finally, I just want to shout out SMU for being collaborators in this. They also had their town hall last night. We're going to keep working with them and yeah, for all of their work as well as with the petition and the protest. And we're really happy to come together with you, spread the word with your McGill friends as well.
And really quick, as I mentioned earlier, there's going to be banner painting this Friday at 5. Yeah, at the art. So exactly. So we'll be providing materials, and that'll be a really great space, I think, to have more informal discussion, hear people's ideas, think about mobilizing moving forward. And also, if any of you are ASFA executives, I'll be reaching out to you, and hopefully we can form some kind of like committee or something to also mobilize more at the department level. But yeah, I very much encourage you to get involved in your departments, talk in your classes if it ever comes up, like. Talk to people. It's very helpful. Like you'd be surprised. Yes, and once there's more actions and more things happening, exactly. Like just getting involved on very basic things like making announcements, spreading the word. You don't have to be feel like you're super involved and know what's happening to go up there and be like, hey, I'm a random student, but there's the CSU town hall is happening. People should come. Like always feel empowered to do that and spread the word about things that you feel passionate about.
Well, I'm going to try to call different community radios and get it put out there on.
Okay, thank you. So that's tomorrow. The banner painting is tomorrow, 5 p.m. right here at the other end of the hallway. Please come and CSU will provide art supplies and food as well.
Free food. Also, save the date, November 16th. We'll be back here talking about the history of the Quebec student movement, going over some tactics. Let's get mobilized in an efficient and effective manner, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.